marking a grim milestone. We'll take you to D.C. and show you how one group is demonstrating the deadly impact that coronavirus is having on the country.
Plus, why researchers say that developing herd immunity to the virus is a long way off.
And Fall League in Arizona has been a staple for many years, but it won't be this year. The reasons behind the cancellation coming up.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Megan Marples.
And I'm Spencer Hardenberg. Thank you for joining us. More than 6 million people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus in the United States, a number that can truly be hard to visualize. But one group in Washington is looking to do just that, visually representing COVID-19's impact on Americans. Cronkite News reporter Tina Giuliano has the story from our Washington bureau.
A group of advocates planted 20,000 flags on the National Mall today in honor of those Americans who died from COVID-19. But to get the true toll of the pandemic, you have to multiply each of these flags by 10. That's because the number of people killed by COVID-19 in the U.S. passed 200,000 this week, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. Carmen Wilkie, one of the volunteers who helped organize this memorial, says they hope to show that these lives are more than just a statistic.
They got together about 20,000 flags and got some people involved to come and put them out today just as a memorial service to those who have died.
She and a group of friends disgruntled with the Trump administration's handling of the pandemic were spurred to organize the COVID-19 Memorial Project.
I think we haven't really had an opportunity to mourn as a country for all that we've lost.
Arizona Representative Tom O'Halloran visited the memorial today, placing a few flags and offering a silent prayer as he looked at the field.
A number is just a number. This is a visual representation of how many lives we've lost.
O'Halloran's sprawling district includes a number of tribal communities that he says have struggled with the spread of the virus.
My district got hit, whether it's Navajo, Hopi, Havasupai, White Mountain Apache, every tribe in my district got hit from this virus.
A brief morning memorial service included remarks by interfaith leaders as well as a speech by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who called for political action starting in the voting booth.
It is a time for us to crush the virus, not crush the Affordable Care Act.
Wilkie said that in a time of isolation and social distancing, it may be harder to come together to grieve and support one another, but it's also more important than ever.
I hope that people do, take from this just a moment to remember and realize that we are together and that we can't just forget about those who have died.
The flags will continue to be up until Wednesday evening. In Washington, Tina Giuliano, Cronkite News.
The amount of deaths caused by coronavirus continues to rise across the U.S. and here in Arizona. Just under 5,500 of those deaths have occurred in our state, including 20 deaths reported today alone. That's according to the latest numbers from the Arizona Department of Health Services. The department is also reporting almost 215,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases in Arizona.
As coronavirus continues to impact the daily lives of people around the world, many are holding on to hope for a vaccine. But since an official release date for the vaccine is unknown, some are more optimistic about herd immunity. It's the concept that an indirect defense against infection occurs when enough people are immune to a disease. But that may not happen anytime soon, according to a new blood study. Some blood banks across the country are offering free COVID-19 antibody tests to attract donors, since there's a blood shortage right now. So far, tests have been conducted on almost 1 million American Red Cross blood donations. The results have not been promising. The tests show less than 2% of participants had COVID-19 antibodies. That suggests that herd immunity is a long way off.
As clinical trials continue in hopes of having a COVID-19 vaccine ready by early next year, recruiting enough people of color to take part has become a challenge. Cronkite News reporter Harry Croton found out about what this means for Arizona. Harry?
COVID-19 has hit communities of color especially hard. Available national data shows more than 50% of cases are in Hispanics, African Americans, Native Americans, and Asians, but trials for a vaccine do not yet reflect that diversity.
While research appears to be moving well ahead of schedule, recent COVID-19 vaccine trial metrics suggest we may actually be behind. Moderna, a biotech company that has developed a vaccine, reports that 28% of its test participants so far are non-white, even though people of color make up around 40% of the country's adult population.
Having a diverse representation actually ensures that we're going to get the best results, both in terms of effectiveness and safety.
Groups like the Alliance of Multicultural Physicians have been urging the Food and Drug Administration to make diversity in these trials a greater priority. For Arizona, that's especially important, as more than a third of the state is made up of non-white residents.
Really important that you're not just testing in a homogeneous population, because vaccines can act differently in different age groups and different so-called races and different ethnicities.
The state is home to 4 vaccine trial sites in Phoenix, Tucson, Peoria, and Chandler. The location of these facilities in larger urban areas creates concern over reaching residents of more rural communities. Dr. Francisco Moreno at the University of Arizona says this could lead to a big disparity in results.
You have to work in a good balance to make sure that you have good representation from the community, good faith efforts to make sure that you are creating an environment that makes it so people have a legitimate opportunity to participate in an equal footing as other folks.
Moreno also emphasizes the importance of cultural and linguistic inclusion at these trial sites to better connect with underserved communities. He says establishing trust between researcher and participant is key.
It's like, why should I get a vaccine? That was my first reaction when they told me, it was like, you want to participate. I was like, is it just like answering questions? And I'm like, sure. But then once you say, will you get the shot? I'm like, whoa.
The issue of trust is evident not only in the need for cultural inclusion, but also through examples from the past. Some have cited government experiments, such as the Tuskegee syphilis trials of the mid-1900s, where health experts unethically observed the effects of untreated syphilis in black men.
There's also a number of other social issues that are going on that perhaps are not as uniquely affecting medicine, but also affect the trust that members of these communities will have in the authorities.
More than a dozen COVID-19 vaccines have successfully entered the phase 3 stage of testing, and Arizona hopes to include at least 30,000 test participants in its portion of the national total.
Hope Research Institute and Quality of Life Medical and Research Center, the organizations conducting test trials in the Valley, could not be reached for comment. You can visit their websites for more information about signing up to participate. In the studio, Harry Croton, Cronkite News.
Every fall, Major League Baseball's best and brightest head to the Phoenix metro area to participate in the Arizona Fall League. The league consists of 6 teams with players from teams across the country. But this year the stadiums will be quiet, and those players will be training for next season elsewhere. That's because, according to Major League Baseball, the Arizona Fall League has been canceled for the 2020 season. MLB cites the coronavirus pandemic as the reasoning behind the cancellation. They don't believe the facilities here are well suited for dozens of players, coaches, and staff to properly social distance. And many of the players are already at their team's alternative sites. The league says they expect to return to normal in 2021. Coming up next on Cronkite News, today is National Voter Registration Day. We'll tell you what you need to do to make sure your vote gets counted.
And was it honest and sincere political activism by teen activists? Or was it a social media campaign that crossed a line? That's the question critics are asking about a political campaign that reportedly paid Arizona teens to echo conservative talking points on their personal social media accounts. How Facebook and Twitter responded when Cronkite News returns. Good job, Eric.
The weather around Phoenix is just beautiful today. Let's take a look at the weather around the valley.
Thank you for joining us for the special edition of Cronkite News. Here are the top stories that we're tracking today at noon.
Some of the best players for their program.
Here we go. Lights up. Whoa.
As artists, we conduct our educations in public. You can never know whether it's going to be a success. One just has to risk it.
It's you and the work and the place. It's a very particular relationship.
Here's our lens Tell us what you think.
Friday night at 9 on Arizona PBS.
Today is National Voter Registration Day, but many Arizonans still aren't registered. Cronkite News politics reporter Alex Gall spoke to Secretary of State Katie Hobbs on how the state is preparing voters and what you need to do to make sure you can cast your ballot.
While the deadline for registering to vote in Arizona is still a few weeks away, officials in the state are encouraging residents to get themselves signed up as soon as possible. Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs spent the day speaking to young voters across the state, encouraging them to participate in the November elections. Hobbs said the state has seen increased registrations this month and expects a record turnout at the polls this year.
In the last month, Arizona saw more than 53,000 new voter registrations. That's a huge number. Last year, we saw around 9,000 new and updated voter registrations on National Voter Registration Day. So I think we expect a little bit more this year. As we head into the election, it's clear that there's a lot of momentum, a lot of enthusiasm, and I think that will translate into record turnout at the polls on Election Day.
Hobbs also said that Arizona will be, quote, in the national spotlight as many of the races here could drastically shift the balance of power nationally. The last day to register to vote in Arizona is October 5th, and you can register online by logging on to arizona.vote. In the broadcast center, Alex Gall, Cronkite News.
With Election Day fast approaching, the Trump campaign is ramping up efforts to win Arizona voters. Today, Donald Trump Jr. is in Chandler for the For More tour. And tomorrow, Eric Trump will host a Latinos for Trump event in Phoenix. He'll be joined by MMA champion Henry Cejudo. Later in the day, he'll host an Evangelicals for Trump event at the Dream City Church in Glendale.
Trump campaign talking points got an airing of a different sort recently, with a social media campaign driven by Arizona teens. But some political analysts are crying foul over what they're calling a secretive effort that masks the people behind it. Cronkite News reporter Mythili Gooby brings us the details from our Washington bureau.
Lots of people do it. Post or retweet political messages on their social media accounts. It's free speech. But what if those messages were secretly coordinated and paid for?
It is sickening in my opinion.
Arizona political consultant Jason Rose was talking about a report that Phoenix-based Turning Point Action hired teens in Arizona to spread pro-Trump messages on social media. The story, first reported by the Washington Post, said the teens were directed to regularly post specific messages echoing Trump campaign talking points. They reportedly went out from personal and some fake accounts.
It's not surprising to me that we're seeing these kind of concerted efforts from political groups to influence and perhaps even misinform or deceive people online, because we're seeing that happen from foreign actors, we're seeing that happen from domestic actors.
It may not be surprising, but it is an apparent violation of Facebook and Twitter rules. Both said they are investigating the issues in Arizona and have already removed posts and accounts violating community guidelines. That does not sit well with Jake Hoffman, the president and CEO of Rally Forge, which the Post says is part of the effort. In a statement, Hoffman called the social media posts, quote, honest and sincere political activism in the 21st century and in the age of COVID-19. He called the teens, quote, activists willing to take a stand for what they believe and fighting for a future full of opportunity, prosperity, and freedom for all. American University communications professor Scott Talon said social media has a low barrier of entry for misinformation. That is a concern for Talon, a political independent, because
problems are you're using young people, paying them, so that means they don't really believe in your cause, or they may or may not believe in your cause, and then you get these ethical questions about spreading misinformation.
Turning Point did not respond to requests for a comment, and officials with both the Trump and Biden campaigns declined comment on the effort. But Rose thinks it crossed a line.
Look, when you're trailing in a campaign, which is about as competitive a thing as exists, there can be a tendency to consider alternatives. And unfortunately, in my business, there's some people that go too far.
In Washington, Mythili Gooby, Cronkite News.
A senior advisor to President Donald Trump's re-election campaign told us when the report came out that he was not aware of the social media effort and could not comment on it. But the advisor Steve Cortez did tell us, quote, "I do love Turning Point."
Are you getting ready for another spooky season? If so, don't go anywhere. After the break, a look at the latest guidelines to help keep you and your family safe this Halloween.
Stephanie Tsai, news anchor. I think women have come a long, long way when women were still struggling to just get the right to vote. So it's important to recognize the sacrifices that women have made. Those rights should not be taken for granted. My message to young girls is to read. Read about the struggles that women have been through and the ways they've overcome them as you go forth in a society that is not yet fully equal.
Here we go. Lights up. Whoa.
As artists, we conduct our educations in public. You can never know whether it's going to be a success. One just has to risk it.
It's you and the work and the place. It's a very particular relationship.
Here's our lens. Tell us what you think.
Friday night at 9 on Arizona PBS.
Although COVID-19 has canceled many traditions and events this year, it does look like the spooky season will still go on, at least in one part of Arizona. The Pima County Health Department released a few guidelines to keep people safe while getting into the spirit of things, such as wearing face masks, washing your hands, and physically distancing. They also put a list together of things you can do instead of trick-or-treating or going to haunted houses. They recommend people go to online parties, car parades, or drive-through and drive-in events instead to help slow the spread of COVID-19. That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.